The ridgeline barely moved. From where Keira lay pressed into the dust, the high desert shimmered with heat waves that blurred every straight edge, every line of geometry meant to define the enemy's stronghold. The sun was past its apex, casting long shadows across the angular bunker compound dug into the slope. Its reinforced concrete edges were softened by distance and mirage. Far above her, 3 overwatch towers flanked the perimeter, skeletal metal spines holding optics, rifles, and one man who had just taken the shot. It came like a whisper, one suppressed crack, then silence. She did not need confirmation. Even before the muffled voices clicked through her earpiece, she had seen the dust bloom in the wrong place. High left, 3 inches, maybe 4. The angle had been tight, the window brief, but the target had moved. Or the shooter had misread the wind. Or maybe the call had just come half a breath too late. The voice was low and clipped. Missed. Target moving. We're shifting interior. Stand by for fallback. Shots unrecoverable. Keira said nothing. Her cheek pressed against the stock, her eye fixed through the scope. The warmth of her exhale fogged the upper arc of the glass. She adjusted neither breath nor posture. Stillness was her answer. Below, the compound reacted like a hive under threat. Metal doors slammed. Figures darted through alleyways of poured concrete. A generator hummed as if bracing for blackout. From her angle, Keira could see the western stairwell in full. 2 guards ran to position, rifles shouldered without clear aim. One of them shouted to another who appeared dragging something heavy. Maybe gear, maybe a body. She tracked their movement, not for emotion, not for curiosity, but for range and rhythm. She blinked once, slow, deliberate. Her task was simple: clear the rooftops. Watch for elevated threats. If someone loitered too long near a satellite dish or shouldered an anti-air launcher, she was meant to silence that impulse. But she had not been given the kill window. That belonged to someone else. The team lead, their veteran shooter, his perch, his scope, his decision. It had all been lined up for him. And still it missed. The phrase lingered. Shots unrecoverable. Keira didn't move. Her rifle was braced low to the gravel, the barrel threading clean through a notch in the fencing. Her position was lower than the others, buried against the slope. It wasn't even a Tier 1 vantage. She had been dropped here as overflow. Necessary coverage. Numbers on a whiteboard that needed filling. Wind stirred faintly along her flank. The dust lifted in a tight spiral, rising from the broken path below and slipping past her periphery like smoke. She let it pass, watching how it bent against steel, fence wire, and heat. One strand curled toward the eastern overlook. The map had shown that angle as blind. No structures, no windows, just rock and slope. She knew better. No angle was ever truly blind. Comms traffic narrowed. The breach team was finishing their sweep. Voices rose and fell with measured authority. Some were wrapping up. Others were preparing fallback checkpoints. The energy had shifted, from surgical to procedural. The kill had been missed. Now it would become an extraction. Keira remained still. The dirt was hot beneath her. Her sleeves clung with sweat. The elbow pinned under her bipod ached from compression. She noted it and filed it away. No adjustment. Her body had already accepted the discomfort as normal. The view through her scope sharpened. She let her focus drift half a degree. There, a reflection. Not sun on metal. Something else. Tighter. Flattened. Glass. She held her breath. The compound itself no longer mattered. Its value had dropped with the missed shot. What they had come to remove or neutralize had slipped through the cracks, likely headed toward a secondary location. She could feel that decision happening in the voice tones now laced with resignation. But that reflection had not moved. The lens in her scope fogged again. Briefly. The rhythm of her breath was now a calculation. Inhale to scan, hold to track. Exhale when nothing shifted. The dust moved again, weaker this time, trailing low across the ridgeline like fingers over sand. Her view narrowed. The eastern overlook shifted. A shadow stepped through, stayed visible for 2 seconds, then vanished. Not fast, not urgent, controlled. She watched the moment, noted the cadence. 38 seconds later, another pass. Same direction, same stride. Slight tilt of head as if aligning with something. Not a sentry, not a wanderer. She did not speak, only adjusted the internal math. From the other end of the channel, no one called her name. They hadn't since the miss. She was still live on the net, but they were past Overwatch now, past her window. She was part of a structure already folding. Extraction assets were moving. The mission would conclude in 12 minutes. She heard the phrasing shift to fallback staging. She breathed once through her nose and blinked again. The Overwatch towers stayed locked in place. The sat dish still tracked north. The busted vehicle still leaned half-crushed near the main breach wall. But Keira no longer tracked the compound itself. The kill shot had not come from here. It would not return here. What had started at the central tower would now end at the overlook. No one had told her that. No one needed to. The reflection returned, stronger this time. She didn't smile, didn't tense, only shifted the pressure in her shoulder. The word recoverable had never meant much to her. It was just someone else's threshold. Her finger rested outside the trigger guard, not poised, not ready, just present. The glass steadied in her lens, still visible, not flinching from light. She marked the interval. 38 seconds. She let the breath leave her chest. The phrase hadn't disappeared from her mind. It had simply changed shape. They called the shot unrecoverable. But they had not asked her yet. The silence thickened as the voices faded, one by one. The comms channels quieted, replaced by the faint hum of distant rotors spooling and the occasional metallic snap of gear being cinched or holstered. No one had called Keira by name. No new instructions came through treachery. The energy was shifting, fluid urgency replaced by measured withdrawal. She remained prone against the slope, her body low and still, tucked into the terrain as though the sand itself had shaped around her. The heat pressed into her back like a second skin, and the dust beneath her chest vibrated faintly with the aftershock of a missed opportunity. She was the only one who had not moved. The haze across the ridgeline blurred the horizon into wavering lines. The compound below no longer pulsed with reaction. It had changed tempo. Where doors had slammed and boots had scattered earlier, now there was order. Men moved with rhythm instead of panic. From her position, she began charting their pattern without touching her watch. One figure passed a steel rail. 36 seconds later, he passed again. Same posture, same turn of the head, same hesitation. Half a second too long, before retreating behind reinforced cover. Then it came the glint. It wasn't sunlight. Not fully. The angle was too precise, too thin. It caught the corner of her scope, then vanished. A partial sweep, curved, softened at the edge, coated optics, not cheap glass, probably hardened. She'd seen it before on advanced lens work, usually mounted inside blinds built to hide more than they revealed. She fixed the location in her mind. No notes, no marks, just geometry, air temperature, wind behavior, and instinct. The glint had aligned with a jagged half-wall, the same position their recon images had flagged as low threat. But she had known better since the second pass. That angle had always been too clean to trust. Her right elbow ached from holding too long on the same plane. Her cheek had gone faintly numb. A tingling line pressed deep against the stock. Her left foot had lost feeling entirely. Her eye burned slightly at the corners. She blinked slowly, once, suppressing the reflex to shift. Her breathing stayed shallow, controlled by habit. Each inhale timed to prevent glass fog. Her exhale bled into the dirt, carried off by dry air and the slow stir of wind. She didn't move, not a single adjustment. The rotation returned. Another pass. Same silhouette. But now the motion changed. The figure leaned longer at the rail, a subtle extension of time, Maybe no more than half a second, and the glint held just a touch too long. It had been repositioned. Not random, not an error, a deliberate angle. She whispered to herself, 36 seconds. The wind had shifted again, barely enough to feel on skin, but enough to lift dust into a low spiral behind the broken fence below. From the movement, she could sense the crosswind had flattened. It now came steadier from the southeast. Her correction began internally. No tools, just intuition, trained through hundreds of prone hours. She recalculated based on dust vectors, the way loose gravel moved near hard structure, and how thermal rise distorted the steel crossbars in the distance. Once, during a Tier 1 evaluation, a senior assessor had told her she lacked the drive to be a first-position sniper. His words had been clipped. Not enough aggression. Doesn't push the rhythm. He had never seen her shoot, just reviewed her file and labeled it with a red note that stayed with her through 2 command cycles. She had not pushed back, hadn't needed to. It wasn't aggression that made a shot land. It was knowing when the rhythm didn't belong to you and holding still until it did. She blinked again. Her eye was starting to dry at the corner, a slow ache spreading down her cheekbone. She cataloged the discomfort without reacting to it. The weight of the rifle grounded her. Not as an extension, not as a tool. It was the anchor of her stillness. The next pass came. 36 seconds. This time, the figure paused longer, shoulder tilted. A second silhouette joined briefly shorter, bulkier. A team of 2. One leaned in toward the hidden blind, likely confirming position. Keira tracked them both in silence. The glint appeared again. Fainter this time. A narrowing signature. Possibly a lens cap half closed. Possibly a pre-fire setup. She didn't mark it out loud. Her internal cadence had already adapted. Dust swirled at the base of the Overwatch tower where the missed shot had originated. Someone was packing gear, collapsing the position. She didn't turn, just noted it. Her scope didn't twitch. Her hands didn't shift. The mission was no longer about opportunity. It was about withdrawal. The high-value target was either dead or gone. The team would extract soon. Her role had never officially included late-stage Overwatch. She had been tasked for early-stage clearance only. Perimeter eyes until entry was complete. But the rotation continued. She marked the new pass. 36 seconds. Another lens flare. This one sharper. It broke the plane a quarter second earlier than the last. The enemy had moved up their cycle. She knew exactly why. They had seen something. Not her. Not directly, but a reflection, a displacement, maybe a hint of shape. It meant their shooter was about to lock position. She could feel the pressure build around that realization. Not fear, just structure. The moment began to solidify like poured concrete, a perfect edge taking form beneath dust and sun and silence. Then the radio call filtered faintly through. No name, just a general update. Extraction plan in motion, command transitioning to fallback, airframes on approach. Keira did not respond. The seconds ticked again. 36. The shadow returned. The rail caught light. The glint blinked once, then vanished. She exhaled slowly, not as release, as reset. In the silence, her confidence did not swell. It deepened. No one was watching her. No one expected anything more from her today. They thought the shot had already come and gone. They were wrong. She didn't need permission to see what they had missed. She needed silence, and 36 seconds more. The glint returned, sharp and clean this time. Keira caught it the instant it slid across the upper edge of her scope. Same angle, same shape, slightly earlier than before. 35 seconds since the last. They were tightening their rotation. Not surveillance, not passive optics. This was a sniper blind, counter-positioned, coated lens, hardened casing, rotated on schedule. They had seen something. They were waiting for confirmation. And she knew. with absolute clarity, that the next sweep could be more than a glance. It could be an aim. Her radio clicked softly. The voice came through calm but firm. Collapse overwatch. Prep for fallback. All forward elements clearing now. Copy. Keira. She didn't answer. The words landed without impact. They were already late. She had watched 4 rotations build and fold. The pattern was solid. 36 seconds, then 35. The silhouette behind the rail was adjusting. She didn't need another glint to confirm it. The choice before her wasn't about accuracy. She had the range, the angle, the timing. The debate wasn't whether she could make the shot. It was whether she would take it outside of orders. In her file, this window was closed. Command had already written this opportunity off. Officially. The sniper threat hadn't been confirmed. The phrase in the last update had said it all. Shots unrecoverable. She rolled her cheek slightly against the stock, just enough to rest her full weight again into the rifle. The rifle didn't hum or breathe or twitch. It simply waited, like she did. Dust hung motionless just beyond the lens. The wind had calmed, flag at a half twist. Good. The mirage still wavered low on the ground, enough to blur the far ridgeline, but not enough to pull her out of zone. She knew the compound's heat signatures, knew how wind dragged over rock, knew that shimmer wasn't drift, it was timing. She adjusted one dial, minor, barely a quarter notch. Bullet drop at 100.0 meters was easy math. She wasn't worried about drag. She was watching for heat warp, the kind that made metal lean slightly to the left in a scope, when in reality, it was dead center. It fooled new shooters. Not her. Her hands stayed calm, grip soft but locked, finger still off the trigger. She could feel her own breath flatten into a narrow rhythm, not anxious, just shaped, trained. She blinked slowly. The memory came, not as a flashback, but as a shaped edge. One training op years back, one frozen moment. She had been on a rooftop, simulation only, tasked with watching a door. The silhouette appeared, not a threat, just part of the run. And she hesitated. Just for a second. Enough for the instructor to mark it. Enough to earn the line that haunted her for months. "You're good with glass," he had said, "but you don't know when to break it." That was the last time she froze. She shifted her pressure subtly into her right shoulder. Nothing else moved. Even her heartbeat began to sync with the timing. 34 seconds. The glint would return in 2. It would hit center frame for less than half a beat. If she was late, they would duck. If she was early Fronson, the shot would miss the hardened arc and ricochet. This was not a chance shot. This was not luck. This was timing layered over physics, layered over refusal. No one had called her again. No one asked what she saw. They thought she was on her way out, that she had no more role in this op, that she was done. She exhaled once, then let her breath go fully still. The world slowed. She wasn't holding her breath out of tension. She was letting her body shift into full stillness. Nothing left to shift, nothing to force. It was already lined up. Her scope caught the flash. It was different now. Slightly lower. That meant the shooter behind the lens had taken up full position. The scope wasn't scanning. It was locking. They had decided. They had seen something. They were preparing to fire. Keira was already ahead of them. She didn't squeeze the trigger. She fell into it. Her finger knew the pressure. Her breath didn't rush. Her eyes didn't twitch. Her mind didn't wander to outcomes. The rifle bucked gently. No thunder. No drama. Just recoil. Return. Reset. The bullet left in silence, carried by calibration, dust, and heat. A single shape made of time. She remained still for another 10 seconds. No confirmation. No question. Her finger rested back off the trigger. She rechecked the angle, the shimmer. The dust thread, all unchanged, but one detail shifted. The glint never came back. Still she didn't move. The wind tugged slightly again at the flag, still at half-twist. The mirage deepened as the sun lowered another degree. Comms clicked faintly in her ear, voices now organizing exfil locations. None mentioned her. She stayed down a little longer. Not to confirm, not to argue, just to respect the moment. That space in time when one person takes a shot, the rest of the world had already counted out. Not because she needed the credit, but because she knew who had been watching her back. She had not flinched, and now someone else wouldn't fire. That was the only order that mattered. There was no sound. Not really. Just the mechanical shift of her rifle easing backward into place. The recoil had been soft, as expected, absorbed into the shoulder she had prepared an hour ago. Keira let the breath slide out of her chest without tension. It was not a reaction. It was part of the sequence. Her cheek stayed against the stock. Her eye remained aligned with the scope. Her heartbeat was slow, steady. Nothing had changed. But she knew. Somewhere out in the haze, beyond the layered heat distortion and the wavering steel of the overlook rail, a faint metallic ping had echoed. It didn't register on comms. No one called it out. No one even paused. But she heard it. Or maybe she felt it. The kind of sound that belonged to metal, hitting metal, softened by range and dry air. That moment, just after impact, when the world takes a breath. The glint didn't return. She watched the rail, watched the crease of shadow behind it. The narrow section of hardened glass that had flared light over and over again was now dull. Nothing shimmered. The angle hadn't shifted. The sun hadn't moved enough to lose contact. And still, no flash. Then, behind the rail, something sagged. Subtle. Not a collapse. Just a tilt of weight. Like a shoulder easing down. A human form losing its anchor and leaning just a few degrees off center. The movement was almost imperceptible. But she saw it. A voice crackled faintly. One of the Delta operators, sounding halfway distracted. Something just moved in Sector 4. Could be wind. Tower 2. Confirm. There was a pause. Then another voice, lower this time, more clipped. Repeat that. Movement. Where? Overlook, east side. Saw a shift in cover. Might have been heat refraction. Keira kept her finger resting outside the trigger guard. She had not moved since the shot. Her eye remained fixed. The weight behind the lens was no longer upright, no longer in rotation, no longer waiting to fire. The comms clicked again, this time with the operator who had missed earlier. His voice was sharper now, but quieter too, confirming loss of glint from east blind, confirming no pattern return. Stand by. Another pause. Blind is cold. That was all. No one said her name. No one asked who took the shot. No one questioned what had changed. The information had arrived too cleanly. There was no chaos to follow it. No ripple of relief. No commands shifting course. Just the acknowledgement that something dangerous had gone silent. That the air no longer carried the same tension. That the threat had passed. And no one had to explain why. Keira breathed again. Deeper this time. It wasn't celebration. It was rhythm. A return to steady function. The heat had not lessened. Her limbs still ached from tension, but the weight in her chest had softened. She closed her left eye slowly, opened it again. Her sight stayed sharp. Through the scope, she watched the place where the counter-sniper had waited. Nothing moved. No shimmer. No flash. The entire slope had gone still. Someone on the net murmured, almost absently, "Huh, that's done then." No one responded. The extraction clock continued. The rotors spun higher. Units prepared for lift. The operation returned to process. But something under the surface had shifted. Keira could feel it. Not in words. Not in attitude. just in the quiet. The silence had changed tone. It was no longer watching the wrong angles. It was watching her work without knowing it. She remained in position for another minute. Let the scope rest where it was. The rifle had cooled slightly under her hand. The stock no longer vibrated from the shot. All kinetic energy had passed. The correction had been sent, received, and closed. She had no intention of reporting it. There was no reason to. The field didn't need a witness, only a result. In the space where the glint used to flicker, there was only stillness now. A piece removed, not with noise, not with drama, but with timing. The moment had not asked permission. It had arrived, been recognized, and acted upon. She eased her finger fully away from the trigger housing, checked her corners once more, then rested her cheek a little heavier against the stock. The mission would end soon, but the shot had already landed. That was enough. The rotors were already spinning when Keira stood. The air had thickened with grit, turning every movement into something muffled and slow. Loose dust kicked into the sky as the first lift bird dropped lower over the extraction zone, its downwash sweeping across the rocks like surf dragged inland. Operators moved deliberately. Voices carried just far enough to confirm, then cut short. No one was shouting. There was no panic, just the hard rhythm of a mission pulling itself closed. She did not rush. Her rifle stayed in her grip, not slung, not waved off. Her steps were steady across the slope, boots pressing into the gravel like it might remember them. Ahead, the others moved in sequence, some already at the ramp, others circling to cover approach. Keira kept her head low, beneath the pulse of the blades. Her braid whipped at her collar. She didn't reach for it. The radio still ran at a low murmur in her ear, channels cross-fed with clearance codes and load confirmations. Somewhere in the noise, a voice updated without emphasis. High-value target confirmed neutralized. Asset window closed. The phrasing had changed. Subtle. Precise. Not maybe neutralized. Confirmed. The kind of confirmation that didn't come from a failed breach or a missed angle. The kind of confirmation that followed a correction someone didn't bother to ask about. At the ramp, the original sniper stood just inside the shadow of the bird, gear packed, eyes down. As she approached, he looked up. Their eyes met for half a second. Nothing passed between them. No nod. No words. Just the pause. Then he stepped back and let her board. Inside the fuselage, the air smelled like cordite and sweat and metal hot from the sun. Everyone looked tired, but alert. No one filled the space with chatter. That wasn't this team's style. Even with the shift in momentum, the weight of the day still sat in the corners of the aircraft. Keira slid into the last open seat, set her rifle across her knees, and clipped in. Her gloves hung from the loop on her belt. Her fingers were still dusted with grit. The ramp began to rise behind her. Another operator beside her tapped the shoulder of the man across from him, saying nothing, just a check. Just habit. The wind outside softened as the hatch sealed. The noise changed from open air to the closed pulse of machines and breath. No one looked directly at her, but no one avoided it either. She leaned her head lightly back against the wall. The hum of the flight systems filtered through her chest. Her boots braced gently against the floor as the Chinook rose, blades heavy above. Through the port window, she could see the compound falling away, already shrinking under the haze. The overlook was barely visible now, just another jagged line on a ridgeline full of them. The lens was gone, but she still knew exactly where it had been. The voice on internal comms updated altitude, flight time, recovery path. No mention of shots fired, no after-action analysis yet. That would come later. But the mood had changed. The voices were sharper again, not with stress, but with focus. The kind of quiet that comes from something finishing cleaner than expected. Keira didn't smile, didn't shift her posture. She just let her pulse even out. Dust still clung to her sleeves. Her elbow still ached faintly from holding position too long. She glanced down at the rifle's casing. A thin scratch ran just below the adjustment dial shallow, not structural, Probably from gravel, or maybe from something else. It didn't matter. She closed her eyes for 2 breaths, not to sleep, not to withdraw, just to reset. No one said thank you. No one needed to. They had seen the pattern break. They had heard the ping. They had watched the glint disappear. When the mission nearly cracked, it had been the quiet correction that brought it back in line. That was enough. The lights on the flight line buzzed low and yellow, just enough to mark the edge of the tarmac. Beyond them, the desert flattened into darkness. The night was warm but softer than it had been that afternoon. Heat bled out of the concrete slowly, giving way to cooler air that carried the faint smell of oil and dust. Keira stepped down from the bird without ceremony. Her boots hit the ground with the same steady weight they always did. No one called out. No one patted her on the shoulder. The team dispersed across the pad, some heading straight for debrief, others to the motor pool. She adjusted the strap on her rifle case, shifted it higher against her shoulder, and walked alone toward the compound. The base was quiet. Low voices moved through open corridors. Most of the overhead lights had already been dimmed. Air conditioners hummed behind reinforced doors. She passed one technician pushing a cart of tools. He gave her a nod. She returned it, not stopping. In the locker room, the tile floor held onto the day's heat. Keira dropped her pack onto the bench and sat slowly, hands moving to her buckles out of muscle memory. The plate carrier came off first, followed by the harness. Dust had settled into the seams, outlining where sweat had evaporated. She peeled the flight suit down to her waist and stretched her arms, the joints stiff from too much stillness. One glove hung from her belt. The other had been inside the case. She laid them side by side. Then she opened the hard case and set the rifle down. Careful, quiet, as if it might still be listening. There was a folded note resting on the foam lining. No envelope, no signature, just a single sheet, tucked near the edge where it would be easy to see but easy to miss. She opened it with one hand. "Thanks for correcting my wind." That was all it said. She read it twice, then set it aside. There was no satisfaction in the words, no ego, just acknowledgement, the kind that mattered. Not everyone would have left that note. Not everyone needed to, but he had. She looked down at her rifle. The casing still held the thin scratch below the dial. Her scope, just slightly off-center now from where her own breath had fogged it earlier in the day, reflected nothing in the dim room. No flash, no sun, just the shape of her face against the lens. They had told her she was too restrained, that she lacked aggression, that she didn't chase windows, didn't lean into the mission the way others did. But aggression had never steadied a barrel. It had never corrected a wind drift in time. It had never told her when to wait instead of fire, dead of. They had been wrong. Not entirely. Just about what counted. She worked through the gear methodically, each strap cleaned and rolled, each latch checked. The sound of metal tapping plastic echoed softly in the empty space. Outside, someone dragged a crate across concrete. Somewhere else, a low laugh faded behind a closing door. Keira ran a cloth once over the scope glass, then she closed the rifle case. The latch clicked into place. It was not a sound of ending. It was a seal, not finality, but readiness. The kind of readiness that didn't require confirmation, that didn't chase headlines or after-action reports, the kind that knew someone else would miss again. Maybe not today. Maybe not even this week. But eventually. And when they did, someone would need to send the shot that came after. She stood, gathered her gear, and moved toward the far exit. No one waited for her. That was fine. She didn't need it. Somewhere behind her, the light above the bench flickered, then held. Stillness followed her out the door,